G'day everybody, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today's video I want to discuss a topic that we all know very well, and that is trigger flinch or flinching on your trigger. I got a comment a little while ago asking, or a guy in a situation of hunting. He's actually talking about hunting, long range hunting in the Alps. So over in Europe, talking about shooting with large calibers, in a hunting rifle, so a fairly light rifle, no muzzle brake. And although he does lots of range practice, he still has a little flinch in what he's doing in his shooting. And how to correct that. I would go with, and it's not something I really try and train, it's something I have thought about. I've had a flinch on occasions with all sorts of things. It's not something I have too much trouble with, but I think with every shooter, there is places where a flinch can be involved. So I want to go through thoughts I've got about the subject, what I do in the way of my trigger training, what I do on that side of things, and try and make sense of things and hopefully be of some help. So to start with, the flinch is a very natural thing. We're talking about firearms, which means that essentially you have an explosion going off your hands, and we all have an internal flinch. We all shut our eyes when it goes bang. Well, you're weird if you don't. It's essentially we all have your eye shuts. It actually at that instant of the explosion, but everything else, if you're doing it properly, everything else is staying cool and calm and doing what it's supposed to do. But it is still a very natural thing. So how do you control it? How do you make it to get to a point where it doesn't go, where you don't flinch, which is involving yanking the trigger in the way of preempting what's going on, the actually flinching when it goes bang, so you're in one form or other affecting a shot. The simple answer to that for the majority of things is training. Just go through, the more you shoot, in general, the better you'll get it. The more trigger time you have, the less that'll be an issue. That doesn't always answer it, and different people operate in different fashions. We've all got brains of their our own persuasion, and because of that, different things happen for different people. There is simple trigger training, and I would say it's also more common to at least know you've got a flinch in a handgun side of things. Less common to know it in a rifle. Doesn't mean you don't have it. The simple training, or it's training slash how you figure out if you are flinching or not flinching, is the likes of, once again, more commonly done with a handgun, but are the likes of loading up your handgun with random fires and no fires. So what I mean by that is loaded ammunition with snap caps or with 5 rounds or whatever it is in there, so that unbeknown to you, or without you being able to know when it's happening, the gun is not necessarily going to fire when you pull the trigger. And that means it'll go bang, it fires, it goes bang, it fires, it goes click, and you'll see. If you see that the handgun's actually, or the rifle, whatever it is, actually is responding to your trigger, because it didn't go bang, but everything else moved, then you know that you're having that problem. That generally works in the way of training, because if you do that semi-regularly, you go through that process, you can see you're flinching, and then you start to control it. And the simple way to control a flinch, and the very simple things before you get into all the complicated side of things, is to pull the trigger like it's not going to fire. If you always do that, if you always pull the trigger like it's not going to fire, then you manage to control that side of things. Of course, that's only if you're able to switch your mind to that place. And that's a very simple fix to it. If you can do that when it really matters, pull the trigger like it's a dry fire. Pull the trigger like it's not going to go bang. You do everything else right, then you won't mess it up. That's going to work properly. But like I said, not everyone else can get themselves to that place. The next thing I'd get into in the way of with a flinch, or with trying to make yourself shoot properly, is I tend to, my first place I fall back to is the engineering side of things. So I'll tend to make a rifle. If a rifle is, and this is very much a commonplace, if a handgun or a rifle or firearm is big and angry to shoot, it hurts, it surprises, it scares, in whatever form that happens, then you're more likely to flinch in that situation. So engineering it, muzzle brakes, weight of rifle, controlling muzzle rise, all that sort of stuff help in that situation, but not always are available. But that's the first place I would fall back to. And so then in a hunting situation even, when you have, essentially in a hunting situation, you are running with compromises. In most situations there are compromises of one form or another, but a hunting situation in particular, you have compromises. You have already probably compromised your shooting position. It's not as perfect as can be. Obviously in well set up hides and things like that, then you can have a perfect shooting position. But in most cases, stalking and the type of long range hunting, you'll tend to be out in the field and you're then already got a compromised shooting position to one degree or another. You tend to be running a lighter rifle, and in some cases no muzzle brakes or suppressors or things like that, which essentially means that then the rifle is going to move more, and especially like this gentleman that left the comment, shooting larger caliber rifles to get long range, still powerful and trying to be ethical in the way of, so it's still got good knockdown power on for larger elk or whatever it is you're shooting. It means that then you have a rifle that's harder to shoot. And what you've done is you've compromised your shooting ability to make it easier to get the rifle out, make it lighter, do all the bits and pieces to make it, you know, whether it's running a no brake because you're running a suppressor or whatever those conditions are, but you've actually compromised your shot by making everything else easier. So to a degree in that situation, I would tend to go with factor in move the compromise a little bit probably. That means make the rifle a little bit heavier, make the rifle a little bit nicer to shoot, to give yourself less compromise on the shot and more compromise on the rifle getting there. Maybe that's a case of run a different caliber, run a lower caliber, which means you've got to get in closer, so then you've compromised your ability to take that shot through the fact you have to get closer. Unless I think you get where I'm going. There's other ways to do that in a mechanical sense. But let's say all that can't be done, all that's not possible. How would you train, how would you get around that problem? Well, I would go through, comes back to a little bit of what I do in my training, what I do for trigger training. A couple of things. I do all forms of shooting. I'm always doing it. I'm always training. I'm always got my mindset in a place where I do it. Whether that's throwing it out at a dartboard, whether that's air rifle training, which we do. We don't shoot the air rifle in any other form than it's quiet, so it's something we can shoot. We live on the outskirts of town, but we're still in a place where we don't have firearms going up in our property. There's neighbours and things that are still close enough for that to be an issue, so we practice with some aluminium plates, as I'll show you a little clip here, hanging off a wall, hanging off a fence where we can actually shoot at that, offhand training, trigger control, sight picture training, steady of a firearm, all that sort of stuff. It works on that score. We do some bow training where it's a long bow and it's a natural point of aim, or it's or natural aiming, or it's the compound bow where you have triggers on, or they have proper sights on there where you're aiming, but once again you're training your body to be able to set a position and be able to shoot. I do all that sort of stuff, and that is a good thing to always do some form of it. Not everyone can go to the range all the time, and I would and shoot their particular firearm all the time. But I would say, as much as that's good, I think a variety gives you more flexibility and more control back in the thing you're doing. I have a toy gun, which I practice, which means that I sit in front of the TV and I function a toy gun. So I'm constantly training with more handgun training, but still trigger control is there. Something that I would say for anyone who does, especially handgun shooting, but rifle shooting as well, to be able to have something where you are concentrating very much on your sight picture, on your trigger control, and do that and play that game. It's something that I will do most nights of the week. I will play with that little Tonka gun. It is a metal thing. It is just a die cast, not very nice thing, but it is something that has basically a proper tactile, fairly heavy trigger release. It trains me to get my hand position right, that sort of stuff, so pull straight through. It's a nice big heavy clunk, so it is something that actually causes, it's not a little plastic thing, anything's better than nothing, but it's something that I do and I practice with all the time. That is something that definitely will help. And it's just constant muscle memory to your sight picture, to being able to train your body to do that sort of stuff all the time. That's something that I think is very relevant. So in an engineering sense of how to answer that sort of thing, where you're hunting out in a situation where you are compromised in places, there's other things you can do to fix it. Making sure that you have the best equipment and the best choices is one of the things you can do. And that is talking about things like, whether it's a tripod, bipod, slings and things like that, that I run. This is my little system, which is just a Manfrotto. There's obviously lots of choices, lots of good bipods, a lot of tripods, I should say. Lots of the tripods I see are very big bulky units, which are good in some fashions, but in the hunting side of things, giving yourself some controls, things that you're confident with and you've practiced with, is very relevant. New things like this bipod EXT system, with its being able to extend the bipod out the front of the rifle. Something that really in a hunting situation I think is going to give a lot of benefit to a lot of people. This is an engineering fix to the problem. And I should go on a little bit of what I'm talking about there. I think that's probably, might even help with the gentleman we're talking about, but I'll explain what I'm actually talking about. What I think a big part of flinching about, and one of the things that, like I said, there's a couple of sides to how you behave after the shot, the instant during the shot, and how you behave before you're yanking the trigger, pulling through the trigger. A lot of that situation happens and everyone will suffer from that. I have a different side of things. Sometimes when I'm struggling with a shot where I'm just so close but I'm not getting there, I'm just after that little inch more, I'll sometimes get to a point where I struggle to pull the trigger. It's like it's only set at just under a pound. There's no pressure, but the brain doesn't want to pull through. I end up yanking it because I'm ready and I just can't get that squeeze to work. Doesn't happen often, but it still happens. What that's actually about is confidence. In the situation I'm talking about for me, everything's working, but I'm struggling and I'm just missing a 24-inch plate at whatever silly distance I'm shooting at, and it's just going in, it's just going there, it's just going over here, and I'm trying to find that extra bit. What I'm actually doing is I'm getting a little bit rattled and I'm getting a little bit more anxious. And of course, the more anxiety you develop, the worse the problem is. So in situations where you're hunting, you've got already a rifle that's a little bit compromised and what you're trying to do with it, you're freezing cold, it's a high priority hit, whether that animal is just at the edge of your range but you can still take it, or it's just been moving, and it's hunting. It's another thing. There's another whole anxiety level that's going on with heart rates and your brain getting excited or anxious, and that builds this problem. So to then try and hold a good steady picture, well, the likes of the mechanical aids help, but what I'm actually talking about is confidence building. So one of the ways that I go through the process of fixing flinches in people, the little bit that I've done on that side of things, is to build confidence in what they're doing. So in some cases, that's talking about using completely different rifles, completely set up rifles, to get to the point where they become completely confident that every time they pull the trigger, they get the job done. So it becomes, as it is for me, largely a completely automatic process. Everything's happening perfectly, but it's in complete automatic. My focus is on getting my crosshairs in the right place and sending the round down range, and the trigger pull, the breath pause, the body form, the everything about it, the bipod pressure, whatever it is you're shooting, however you're setting up, that's all happening without having to think about it. I'm thinking about the shot, I'm thinking about the conditions, I'm thinking about the things I've got to change, but everything is happening automatically, which is part of when you are confident, when you have good confidence in building that into you. So that can be done on a different rifle, a Lyco rifle, a well set up rifle, and work really well, work wonders on that side of things. in that same format, a good form of training that I've seen, and something like many years ago I learned, was shooting the bottom end of rifles, which was, I shouldn't say bottom end, it's just a 22 long rifle. What I was shooting it about was super slow ammo. So 750 feet per second, the super quiet ammo, so it's super slow. And when I first started to shoot it, I just wanted to see basically outperforming the rifle, and I found I got a terrible grip at only 50 yards. It was like a 6-inch grip. What's going on? I was a bit lazy how I'd set up the rifle. I just had it on a light little bipod and well, actually I can't remember if it was a bipod, a bag, or what it was, but I was resting on something I was shooting, and the grip was about 6 inches. The first 3 or 4 shots were out like, well, that's all over the place, what's going on? And then I thought, okay, let's concentrate on this and let's do this properly. And then it come right back down to where it's supposed to be, in like an inch grip or half-inch grip, whatever it was, at like 50 yards. And I realised what was actually happening. What was actually happening is I was being a bit lazy with things, but it was a bit stiffer trigger in the rifle, and what was happening is, because that ammo is so slow, getting out the barrel, that means that actually what you do after the trigger pull is affecting the round a lot. So actually holding that rifle and getting that to where your follow through was perfect was super important with that very slow ammo. Very good training, because it makes you go to a mindset of your follow through, your trigger squeeze, how your trigger happens. It's really important with this sort of stuff. There's nothing else going on. The rifle's not scaring you. It's not even making a loud noise, but what you do afterwards is very important. And that can be a key for some people with whether that's just a little rifle that shoots well in high power, or it's right back down to that low end of a 22 and slow ammo, is that in some cases, how to fix that big scary shot where you have got a flinch and it's a problem, is that for some people, they're going to convince themselves right there, for this shot, I've got everything else set up, doing everything else. For this shot, I shoot it like it's the 22, and then do that shot like that. So, and of course, for other people, that can be a case of, I just do my trigger pull right. For other people, it's a case of, shoot this one like it's a blank, or shoot this one like it's a done. Just make this go through the process. There's the people that go through the process of dry firing to start off with. It's really not something you want to do and set up for a round. Animals hear things, everything hears things a lot more than you realise. That click of the firing pin falling or the hammer falling is too loud to go through, but different things to trick yourself with. Bits that I have done is in the opposite direction. Some of the rifles I've shot, some of the likes of shooting that 45-70, I got a flinch out of that. I didn't do it more than twice in the rounds I fired there, but that is just simply controlling and thinking about doing my trigger. When I go from automatically pulling it, I flinched, and there's a fair bit going on, it's hold over, the rifle sitting low on my shoulder because the way I was trying to shoot it. It's starting to hurt, very stout lobe, it's in there. I'm trying to hold over way away from there, so I'm dealing with what's going on with the wind and that side of things, and there's a bit of anxiety building up on that side of things. There's a flinch. I know I flinched. It's because it was hurting me, and I'm going to the rest of it. The simple bit I switch to is do the trigger pull properly.
Wind's just changing.
That is actually falling back to all that other information.
Oh, left.
Another thing that trained me a fair bit was the bow shooting that I've done. There's one particular bow I use, an 80-pound bow, which is a Matthews Monster bow in the Accelerator, I think it's called. It's a while ago since I've bought it. It's one that has, in a compound bow, they have a spot where you pull back, the pressure comes off, so you have a little soft spot back here that you're sitting in. On that bow, it's a very short soft spot. If you release it, let it go forward 1/4 inch, it'll yank it out of your hands. And it's an 80-pound bow, so it yanks with a fair bit of force. That is something that, through a process there, that made it very anxious to shoot that bow. I have a setup where I shoot, as I showed you previously, shoot at the end of the house. I don't want to miss. If I miss, I've damaged something or other. So, bad idea for most people. I agree with you completely. Good for training, good for getting steadiness and making you do the right thing, putting the pressure on in place where it doesn't matter. It does a little bit, but it's not the same as it could be, and it's something of the things that I've pushed myself through to make myself more capable of dealing with all situations. Wouldn't say that's good training for everybody. For some people, that's the opposite thing you should do. Some people push them harder, bite off a whole heap and chew like crazy. For some people that works. For other people, you're just going to make the problem a lot worse. You just are going to inbuild the problem, will end up flinching on a 22 because it's automatically trained that things are going to go bad when you pull the trigger. And as I would say in this situation, and I suppose I should go back to it a few times, it is not the same for everybody. It is what suits you. So as a roundup of trigger training or trying to control the flinch, I would say, as I started with, there's no particular thing that fixes for everybody. There is probably training in various forms and things that everybody can do and should do in some form or other. Whether that's with the engineering of the firearm, whether that's the accessories and bits and pieces you use on the outside of the firearm, whether the caliber choice, the weight, that side of things, can all be very relevant, and in some cases they're not able to be moved at all. What I would say also with that is, and what it comes down to for me in all senses, is confidence. Is building confidence is what is the most important thing I can think of on that side of things. Making it so that you are calm and in control in releasing that trigger. And I suppose I would say with that as a point to know that if you are, and certainly as a young shooter, there's times where I felt with some rifles I would shoot and I was just never had that confident feel. What that actually meant was there was a flinch there. There was a feeling when it goes bang and I just didn't quite have control, the body was going through a flinch. And getting that to a calm point is really, that was with a rifle, so it wasn't something that was obvious like a handgun where you can see yourself flinch. It was something that there was a anxiety that was there that just simply, for me, simple training, simple using it, got rid of that problem. The more I went, not just with that firearm, with everything, the more confidence I got in what I did, the easier it became to control that. But it is a point that you will find that if it's not calm, if it's to the point where it goes bang and there is a lack of confidence feeling, there is an anxious feeling at that instant of what's actually happened, what actually happened, out of that sort of stuff, then you've got work to do. But gaining that confidence is done in many different ways. Trigger training, playing with the toy, basically lots of time at the range, all those things can help, but aren't always going to be the answer. In some cases, like I said, shooting something little with a lot less power that trains you follow through and that side of thing is more important. That's actually going to do it for you. In other places, taking the bigger ride, going for something that hits you harder, that actually makes you then, when you come back to your rifle, come back to the rifle you want to use, is then nice and simple. For some people, that's going to work. All about getting to the point where you are confident, where when you pull that trigger, it's all going to happen for you. And that's the most valuable thing I can say. That's the biggest thing that I see changes in people that I know in Sam, in her shooting. I certainly saw it in her a lot. You get to the point where you pull the trigger and you know the result, or almost know the result before you've actually pulled the trigger, gives you supreme confidence with things and lets you focus, lets your brain focus on doing the job properly. Because it does, you get that reward. You squeeze the trigger properly, you hit straight, you squeeze the trigger properly, you hit straight. That just encourages you to do the right thing. When you squeeze the trigger, there's a flinch, the gun's bucking, things are going on, and because of the caliber, because of the weight, because of whatever it is, that does the opposite. When you're not certain what the end result is going to be, your anxiety lifts. Largely, I tend to encourage people to shoot a smaller caliber for the same job. For that exact reason. They're easier to shoot. Now, that doesn't mean you're less of a person because you're not shooting a larger caliber. That's not what firearms are about at all. It's not, and as much as possible, disconnecting ego from everything you do is a better way to do things. Build confidence in what you're doing. As I said, I would tend to use a smaller caliber to get the same job done so everything works easier. Not always an option, but build that confidence into you. Build that confidence in, that will answer it, and it's just a way of finding out how to do that. Anyway, that's probably enough for the moment. There's other things I can discuss on site pictures and that side of things. The way I do it is get it very stable. That isn't always an option, whether you're running a figure eight over your target or lifting onto your target. All that sort of stuff are choices for things, and I think personal ways of doing stuff. I tend to hold very stable, but not really a topic I want to go any further into today. Largely my fix or my answer is build confidence, and all those techniques are different ways that I have either used or seen used or make sense to me in the way of what I've done, and hopefully they're of some help to some people. Anyway, feel free to leave comments about what's worked for you, and hopefully there is some tips for everybody to make us all better shooters. Anyway guys, thanks for checking us out, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching the video guys, I hope you enjoyed. Down below here we've got a link to our web store where we have some of the specialised long range shooting products that we actually produce. Check them out.
And for those of you who can, it'd be great to get some help. In our store we have support bits, and when you purchase those, the money goes direct to our channel and helps us bring these videos to you.
Thanks guys.
See you next time.